Hey, welcome back, everybody. Of course, you know me. My name is Dr. Keith McNally. This is Trail to Transformation, and you know me. I need to get names right. This is Laura Cross, but Laura Cross is an entrepreneur with a bunch of other letters behind her name here on Zoom. Laura, welcome to the conversation.
Thank you, Dr. Key. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So this is all about, I call this the podcast for veterans by veterans. You don't have to be a veteran to be on the show, but you actually are. You are an Air Force veteran, yeah?
I am. I am full circle too. I was dependent, active duty, back to dependent, and widow. So I say I did the whole full circle.
Oh my goodness. And so everybody kind of chooses a branch of service to kind of go into for some reason. My dad was Navy. And this was a long, long time ago. My dad was Navy, and so we had that conversation. And I don't know if you liked my comment or not, but I said I was just going to go one up on him. And so I joined the Marine Corps. And I did, and I did my time of service. This is late 80s, early 90s. And so just out of curiosity, why Air Force?
My father was Air Force, and I was highly encouraged to look at the Air Force. So yeah, it was not necessarily on my radar, but I was highly encouraged, and of course they made everything, sound great, glorious, and off I went. So
So
yeah.
were you officer or enlisted? Because some people
Oh
kind
no,
of go in
enlisted,
enlisted.
enlisted.
Okay. And same with me. I literally I signed up. I remember the day when my birthday when I turned 18 was on a Sunday, again, many, many moons ago. And so I could had to go in the following day. And I was living actually with my dad, problematic childhood, but I was with my dad, not too much of a story here. Living in Florida, I did sign up, had no real plans of what to do with my life, even though I did really good in high school and, really wasn't sure how to get into college, even though that sounds kind of silly. No real guidance from parents or mentors. And so, the military became my life for a couple of years. But so what? Full
So,
circle, you are
so
enlisted, but there's other variables here.
yeah, a little bit backwards, I guess, from you. So my father was Air Force. He retired Air Force, so we bounced around a lot from there. So I was already a dependent, and I was already kind of used to traveling and experiencing different things. My high school grades were never that great because I didn't like school. I'm not. It's not that I was not smart. I just did not like school. So I did go into community college because my GPA was not good enough for a college at that time.
Mm.
And I had 2.5 years of college. I started out with business. They were talking about widgets, and I thought, well, this doesn't make sense. And I liked writing computer programs. So I went back to my computer information systems. And after a conversation with my father and going to hear the recruiter taking the ADISFAB, I was told I was going to be an aircraft electrician, but I was on the delayed enlistment program. So I picked up a semester of electronics while I was waiting to go in. So I had 2.5 years of college, just no degree. And even though my applications and stuff were higher, they decided to make me an aircraft electrician. So I wired F-15s and F-16s. And
Wow. Well, that's
that's
a
where my
lot.
journey started.
Well, that's a lot better to me because I really didn't have any aspirations other than to become the next version of Rambo. Because that was the icon, in the 80s and 90s, and so that was really my focus. I went into infantry and became a mortarman, and so not quite the career aspirations, but it is what it
Right.
is.
Yeah, no,
So,
I went to Iceland first, and from Iceland to Arizona, and Arizona is where I had met my husband. So he was also Air Force, and he was ground radio. So I had to go wherever fighter jets were, and he worked the opposite end. After Desert Storm calmed down, I was offered an early out because my career field was over 100% manned. So at that time, that is when I separated because, as well as military people may know, not everybody else may not know. The military will tell you if they wanted you to have a spouse or a family, they would issue you one. It is not their priority to keep them together. And us being opposite ends of the flight line, there was a good chance. Although Air Force, I think is normally one of the better ones to try to keep people together, but it's still not a guarantee. And so I separated. So I became a dependent again.
okay. So let's kind of talk about that. Trail to Transformation is all about. how that transition happens for my guests. And so you went in, you served, you got out. And can you tell us about how that actually works, or how it worked for you?
Yeah, I mean, I did multiple jobs before I went in, so I knew I had a lot of different skill sets, and I've always been the type that I could pretty much learn anything if I needed to. Military has always told us they pay us under what it takes to live there, so regardless, I knew I had to find a job. And that just kind of continued to broaden skills. I started out working with the VA and helping other people to find jobs, which was an interesting look on that, on how they help replace veterans in places. And it doesn't pay much, but then again, it's not taxable either. So it's like gets paid way under.
Hmm.
But from there, I found another job from personal secretary to working in a comic book store. I had the Montgomery GI Bill, so I went back to school. I was going to try and finish my computer information systems degree. And but then we get orders, and now we're going to Germany. So nothing ever really, necessarily lasted that long. It wasn't a career move per se. It was just to help make ends meet, and it just kept broadening my skills. So
Well, and that's a good thing. So with all that, how many times were you kind of moving about? So as a spouse.
as a
So did
spouse,
yeah.
so from Arizona, we went to Germany for 3 years, and he was always with a combat comm. So since he was ground radio, they supported like the Army, the Marines, and radios and stuff. So they went TDY 3 to 4 months. Okay, temporary duty assignment for those not military. For 3 to 4 months at a time, they try to keep them home for a month. They'd be back out.
Hmm.
So a lot of our marriage was spent separated and doing stuff. So from Germany, we went to North Dakota. And then from North Dakota, we got back down to Colorado. And that was the first time where now, other than one remote tour, because I had my remote out of the way, Iceland's a remote tour. They had to send him remote. And other than that, maybe once a year now, he would go for 3 to 4 months. Otherwise, we were finally back together, where we could see each other more. We weren't separated as much. However, when we moved to Colorado, we were told we got paid 36% under what it took to live there.
Hmm.
And so I picked up a night job because nights paid more. And so now we're two ships that pass in the night. You say hi, and while he's going to bed, I'm going to work, and then I come home, he's going to work. And if you want to see each other, I'd get up and go have lunch with him. So it's not a suggested path, I would say. But we got lucky. We were kind of limited. We didn't move as much anymore.
Well, you bring
So
up a really interesting, idea here because veterans, those who have partners or spouses, do have to figure out a lot of new things now that they've left a very regimented, very systematic way of living. And so you've had to make adjustments along the way. And that can be really challenging and difficult for many, many people. What helped you at least meet the challenge or overcome the challenge and be successful at it?
I think things that have helped, and sometimes it's kind of a blur as to whether it was just my upbringing, since my father was Air Force also, or the military. But I've always taken, a lot of pride. You're taught to be on time, so I was dependable. They knew they could rely on me, and most employers loved seeing military background because they knew you would be there, you would show up, and this is what you do. It's not. It's kind of in our DNA, I guess.
Hmm.
This is what we get taught. So from that aspect, it was a good thing, and it made getting some of the jobs, in my view, easier. So it was, yeah, I don't know. As I said, that is probably one of the best things I can say. And of course, I was always, up early. I was always there early because 15 minutes early is on time. So that is me. It didn't. Some of that stuff didn't start to become problematic until I shifted into being an entrepreneur.
Ooh,
So,
okay. Well, before we jump into that conversation,
mhm.
there's not just the employment aspect of the transition element. There's who you are personally, how you interrelate with the community and with your family. Were there challenges in any of those other areas of your life as you transitioned and really kind of stepped into or backed into being a civilian?
Um, well, like I said, I guess at that point in time, I had already kind of gotten used to picking up jobs from wherever I needed to. Not everything that they did ever made sense, but I just knew that's what I had to follow. If I was going to keep a job, I knew how to follow what they wanted to move up. So I never had problems getting, increases or good reviews. So I think it had a part of that adaptability. Because we're always taught to adjust and adapt, and I was good at doing that. I think sometimes when veterans have problems, it's when they can't adjust or adapt because it doesn't make sense to them or they don't agree with it. Um, it's just, I
And
guess
that's
I've always
actually
been more adaptable.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's actually been one of the critical elements. So, based on certain statistics that I've come across, those first 12 months post-service are very critical. It's almost like a pass-fail test. And without the right people in your space, mentors, friends, spouses who are very, very supportive of you in your transition, it's sometimes very difficult to find jobs or maintain relationships or kind of really step back into an unregimented space because now you're free to make choices, free to choose who you hang out with. Maybe you're not, maybe with your spouse or not. But whatever that looks like, even finding jobs, and you talked about, employers do look for certain qualities that, veterans do bring to the table, but that's not always the situation because sometimes it's like, well, you may carry some emotional baggage or some stressors that we don't want to deal with. And this may not be the conversation for that, but you were able to navigate this space rather successfully. But then you just said, I forego the whole being an employee, and you stepped into a new realm of making money. You're an entrepreneur.
I am.
So
I
how does
am.
that work?
And I'm much happier that way. So the reason that came about is because I lost my husband on December 21st of 2004.
Okay, my
Was
condolences.
I was working the nights, the night job, and we were laughing at lunch, and he was dead by 10 o'clock that night. My whole world crashed for me, and that was one of the largest adjustments I have ever had to make. I don't wish that on anybody, but it's life, and it happened. So that was, yeah, that was my biggest challenge and stuff. I knew how to do stuff, and it's kind of weird because there's certain things that you used to do all the time, but maybe you stopped doing it because you had a spouse to rely on to do it. But now that's not there, and now you start to worry about, okay, I didn't do that anymore. How does this work? Because now you have to take it over. And so that was a huge challenge. But for me, that was a wake up. I learned life was too short to be living the life the way we were living. Me working nights, him making working days. I will never do that again. I value what I have. I don't want to lose it anymore. But I learned it was too short, and that's when I knew I needed to do something for myself, be control of my own time. When I go, within 14 months after my husband passed, I had been to 3 different funerals, 4 different hospitals for friends or family members, and I had had enough.
Mm.
And when you have people saying, well, I don't know if I want to be friends with you, everyone dies around you. It's amazing sometimes what people just say. They just either think they're being funny or they just don't know how to say things. But,
Right.
um, so that was another, transition. And I'm like, yeah, no, I don't have to, live this way. And it took a lot of years to get, where I'm going. But
Mm.
when you're taught and you do stuff and you work a certain way, um, the more I progressed down and became an entrepreneur, for one, yeah, I love what I do. So I think when you're an entrepreneur, you should be passionate about what you're doing. Otherwise, it's just another job. But when you're doing this and you're doing like these Zooms and these meetings and you're meeting with people, or even if you're going to meet them somewhere, okay, I'm still running on that 15 minutes early is on time. Everything else is late. Otherwise, you're not respecting that person's time. But Also, other people don't necessarily run that way because they're busy. They have meetings packed in, or maybe something happened. It used to really stress me out. And I'm just like, you know what? It's life. They either show up or they don't. And if they don't, hey, we're just going to reschedule because the stress of someone else not meeting
Expectation. Yeah.
that expectation, that rigid or regimented thing that I had was
Mhm.
used to like stress me out. So yeah, I let go of that. It's okay.
So I have to ask,
Mhm.
and I know we had this conversation briefly offline. You are an entrepreneur of what? So what exactly do you do?
I do a number of things, but you can call me the entrepreneur of me. I don't necessarily believe in labels or putting people in boxes anymore. I don't think everything has to have a box or a label. I have always been passionate about helping others and holistically and judgment free. I think there's way too much criticism and judgment. I feel it causes a lot of problems with people, mental health, and everything else because they're always so worried about what everybody else thinks. And after I had been through everything and I got to the space that I was, it's such a more peaceful way of living. So everything holistic. And I like building those communities so that people know that they're not alone. There's others that have gone through challenges, something that they can relate to. And that person may not be in your back door. They may be in a totally another country, but you know what? With technology and Zoom, we can do that. We can connect and we can support each other. So yeah, I am uniquely me. I don't necessarily have a label. I am under my company name, everything falls under White Sands. So it's either White Sands Premier Travel, White Sands Self Care, because to me it all goes together. I am the host of Mindful Mondays with Laura Cross. That's something I love doing, as I had the pleasure of having you on because I love when people can share their journeys, their challenges, how they got over it, how they support others. And, I love the fact that you were willing to, share that and share it with the community so that others that are in that spot or maybe struggling, you never know who you can reach. And if you can just reach one person, then I'm good and I feel like I'm doing my job.
Well, at this point in the game, I want to be able to touch more than one person because the story is that valuable. And so for those who watch Trail of Transformation know that I have attempted suicide 5 times and I've also survived a heart attack. And so one, I do appreciate from the bottom of my heart to be on your show because it's not just a YouTube channel. It's actually you're on syndication. You are a TV show.
Oh, E360 TV is working on being syndicated, but it is on a TV network and show. It streams across multiple things, so it's not a podcast. It's everybody calls it podcast. No, it's a TV show. It's more like a
Okay.
talk TV show, but
Okay.
um, yeah, yeah, and that took some doing. That took some doing.
And so and I also appreciate the fact that you've connected me with the person who kind of I need to talk to, and so I want to look into that myself. But you talked about you're the entrepreneur of me, but what are you trying to help people with, or what are the challenges that your clients face that you kind of guide them along?
I love for people to be able to see that there are different ways of living and healing, that with just some lifestyle changes and different things holistically, we can take control of our health and our life and not be so dependent on, we call it healthcare, I call it sick care. Yes, drugs have their place, but I've seen it do a lot of damage to a
Mhm.
lot of people. And there are other options out there. Um, some of it maybe just to find that zen or that quiet moment to be able to quiet down the brain, especially with veterans. I have a lot of veteran friends that suffer from the PTSD or traumatic brain injury because of things that they've gone through.
Mhm.
Depends on what service you are in and how close to action you were, but it leaves its mark. It leaves its mark on people. It's not something that's you can just wipe away. Maybe people think they've dealt with it, but a lot of times it hasn't. It's trapped in their body and it can come out causing people disease, discomfort, not function well. Um, So yeah, living a different lifestyle and knowing how you can help yourself. You don't have to necessarily rely on that.
Well, since we have talked about this, how do people find you on the World Wide Web? Where are you?
So I have my YouTube channel, which is at Mindful Mondays with Laura Cross. You can find me on Facebook, on LinkedIn, which that also comes up on Instagram. Pretty much if it says Laura Cross White Sands, you'll find me. I do have my White Sands self-care community. So I always encourage anybody to join that, introduce yourself, let them know who you are, what you do, how you can support them. Like I said, my communities are all judgment free. So I do not tolerate anybody being nasty with anyone because it's not necessary. And if they need to be that way, then my group and my community is not for you.
Well, I'm going to put all those links in the description of this video, so I do appreciate it. To kind of close out the conversation, please, 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 what I always ask my guests is if there is any insight, wisdom, or just knowledge that you picked up along the way to share with veterans or military personnel who are transitioning back into civilian life. What are some really key pieces to that puzzle to help them make that next 12 months successful?
For me, a good part of it, for me, for first part of it was a journey to discover of actually who I am, because you're told what to do, you're told who you're going to be and what you have to follow. And I think when you get in that realm, you can kind of lose the sense of who you are and what truly makes you happy. Once you have figured that out, you can be an entrepreneur for almost anything you want. You can make into a business pretty much. It has to be something that you are passionate about. Um, try to be more open minded and listen to other people's perspectives. There are more than one way to do things. And it's just being open to it or hear them out. A lot of times, sometimes we just get in that mode where we're just waiting for them to shut up because we think our way, our way is the right way. And that's what you're going to tell them. But we can communicate better if we are more open minded. And their eyes might glass over when you keep using acronyms. I was on someone else's show and I apparently I mentioned snafu, and she happened to be previous military, so knew.
You got
But
it.
TDY, the stuff we're used to using, the average person does not understand that.
Without,
Hey,
without
entrepreneur, they told me VA, I'm thinking veteran affairs, and it's like, oh no, it stands for virtual assistant.
assistant.
I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In certain communities, we have to be clear. So just for the fun of it, without using any
Yes,
vul
yes,
vulgar
I
words,
I got
what
you.
is snafu?
Situation normal, all messed up.
All fouled up, absolutely.
Yeah, all fouled up. Yeah, whatever you want to put that up for. But yes, that is a military term. But it was one I was so used to. I was raised in around military. I was in military. So to me, it was an everyday word. If people have not experienced that or know that, they don't understand or know necessarily the type of lifestyle that we had to do. They have their own perceptions and they could be very wrong perceptions of what our life is like in the military. So I would say not to necessarily get upset about it, but try to politely educate them, because that's normally what it comes down to, is lack of education or something that they heard, was totally off. And, they don't realize that some people think just because we're in the military, we have everything handed to us. We don't, we don't, but it's lack of education.
It was a lack of understanding. Laura, thank you so much for being on Trail to Transformation. For the rest of you, I do appreciate your time. And as always, you take care and I'll see you next time.
Thank you.